So I'm delighted to have the chance to be here with you today with members of the Shadow Cabinet. It's the first time the Shadow Cabinet has met outside London since the general election. We're going to be doing this around the country. And we've come here to Gateshead really to hear from you and to talk about the issues that you want to talk about. Because we're a party that lost an election some months ago, it's right we come out and talk to you. Before we do that, however, I just want to make some comments about an issue that I think is central to our future as a country. I think all of us, as we look around the country, will be seeing and seeing in our communities cuts that we are very worried about. And we'll see the effects of those cuts. And we'll be worried about the impact on local services and local people. And we'll be worried about the effects on jobs and growth and what will happen to our communities. But I think there is a deeper concern, and that's what I want to talk about. Because one of the things that I think we expect in Britain is that the next generation will do better than the last. That we can have not just the same opportunities for our kids that we had, but better opportunities. That is, if you like, the promise of Britain, that the next generation can do better than the last. And what I hear going around the country and talking to people is that they feel that that promise is under threat as never before, when they look at all the challenges the next generation are going to face. And there's recent evidence on this which says that less than 1 out of 10 people think the next generation are going to have an easier life than them, and more than 7 out of 10 think life will be more difficult for that next generation. Now, I think that what our country must be about is ensuring that we can pass on better opportunities to the next generation than we had ourselves. And that's what I just want to talk about for a few minutes before we get into the questions and discussion. Let me start by saying something about my perspective on this as an individual. My family's story about the next generation and about the British promise. Because my parents came to this country before and after the Second World War as refugees. My dad came here at the age of 16 in 1940 with his father from Belgium, fleeing from the Nazis. He went to night school, went to the Navy, and then went to university. And it was the opportunities that Britain provided that enabled him to provide for me and my brother a secure and stable upbringing. And then I went to my local comprehensive school and took advantage of those opportunities. My dad always used to talk about the opportunities that Britain had provided him and the fact that he was able to pass on those opportunities to me and to my brother David. And it is a long way from being a refugee family leaving Belgium to becoming leader of the Labour Party. But I'm under no illusions about why that was possible. It was possible because of the opportunities this country provided, as well as the upbringing that my parents gave me. And the reason that I'm in politics and the reason that I'm here today is because I want to do my bit to make sure that that promise of progress for the next generation can be passed on. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about this issue as a country. Let me say something, secondly, about what this means in practice. Because look around us at the challenges that young people today face. And to be honest, this isn't just to do with the actions of one government. It goes beyond the actions of one government. And we all know the questions that we all ask ourselves about our kids. We ask, what kind of job are they going to do in the future? Because we know that there are good jobs for those who get good qualifications and can rise to the top. But we also know there are lots of low-paid and insecure jobs out there. And we worry about those jobs, and we worry about the future that means for our children. We worry too about their chances of getting on the housing ladder. The average age at which you can buy a house today in Britain, if you don't have help from your parents, is 37 years old. That says something about the chances that were often taken for granted in the past of being able to buy or rent a home of your own as a young couple. And it's not just about jobs and housing, it's about quality of life as well. When I think about my kids and I think about the questions that they're going to be asking me when they grow up, they're a bit young to be asking me questions about politics at the moment, they're both under 2, but when I think about the questions that they're going to be asking me, I think one of the most important questions they'll be asking me is, were you part of the last generation that didn't get climate change, or were you part of the first generation that did get it? So in all of these areas, in jobs, in housing, in quality of life, and there'll be lots of other issues around quality of life people want to raise, there's a real challenge that I think we're all conscious the next generation is going to face. But there is a truth also that we need to acknowledge, which is that this challenge that the next generation faces will affect some people more than others. Because the most affluent can pass on opportunity and privilege to the next generation. And actually it's about a country that is still too divided by class and income and wealth, and the impact that that is going to have on lower and middle income families in this country as they think about their kids' future. So that's something about how I see the country and how I see the challenges that we face. Now, some people will say, well, look, this is very pessimistic, and they'll say it's so pessimistic we feel that nothing can be done. I don't believe that. The reason I believe in politics is because I think it can make a difference to these issues. It can make a difference so that the next generation can do better than the last, so that promise of Britain can be met. And we've got people here today of all parties and none. This wasn't an invited Labour Party audience. And so I'm not going to spend ages talking about what the last government did. But I think when I think about the history of our party, when we've been at our best, we have focused on this issue of how we help the next generation. One of our proudest achievements, as Joan said, was Sure Start Children's Centres. They were about making sure that everybody had that opportunity to get on. Further back, we had the Open University, which people are still benefiting from today. The NHS was about saying that healthcare will be there when you need it, whatever your background. So those are all things that we took, that we did as a party, and that are now part, I hope, of our national fabric. And that's where our party has to stand. It has to stand as the party that says, we believe in making this promise of Britain a reality. We believe that the next generation can do better than the last, and that's where it's going to stand under my leadership. Let me then say something about what I believe this government is doing. I've said there are real challenges to the next generation in Britain. Now, the question then is, are we moving forward in meeting this promise that the next generation can do better than the last, or are we moving backwards? And I really fear we are moving backwards. And I get this going around the country and talking to people. Take the educational maintenance allowance, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people here who know people who have kids who used to get the educational maintenance allowance. That has made an enormous difference to 16 to 18-year-olds getting on in life and going on to college and going to university. But actually they're getting rid of the educational maintenance allowance. And I was at college the other day, and young person after young person said to me, it made it possible for me to buy books. It made it possible for me to pay for transport. It made a huge difference to my life. And they couldn't understand why government would get rid of it. And then take the trebling of tuition fees. Some people would say, well, look, is this trebling of tuition fees really going to make a difference to aspiration? Is it really going to make a difference to what the next generation can do? I talked to kids in my own constituency about this, and I said, look, will it make a difference to you going to university? Will it make a difference to you going to the best universities? And of course they said it would, because a policy designed in Whitehall on some theory about what people might earn in the future is not a policy that's going to work in the real world. And then you go from educational maintenance allowance to what's happening in relation to tuition fees, to apprenticeships, to the Child Trust Fund, to a whole range of things where the government is taking action, setting back the chances of future generations. Now the question is, why are they doing it? And maybe I'm going to surprise you. I believe that David Cameron and Nick Clegg do want the next generation to do better than the last. So why are they doing it? They're doing it partly because they say that the best long-term thing to do for the country is to tackle the deficit, the budget deficit, as far and as fast as we can. Now, I disagree with them. I would take a more balanced approach to cutting the deficit. Why? Because actually it turns out it's the worst of short-termism to cut the deficit in the way that they're doing. Because look at the impact it has on future generations. It's not long-termism to take away the ladders from future generations in this country. It's the worst of short-termism. But there is also a deeper reason. There's also a deeper reason which we've got to understand. When they talk about educational maintenance allowances, or when they talk about university education, it makes it sound like it's only about the individual. It's only about the individual choice and the choice that individual will make. It's not. It is about a shared responsibility that we all have. Because actually, we all have not just a responsibility, but an interest in kids staying on at school or college. We all have not just a responsibility, but an interest in kids going to university. We all have a responsibility and an interest in kids getting good apprenticeships. And that's what I think they don't understand, that sense of shared responsibility that we all have to people getting on. Because we will be not just a better country socially, but a better country economically as well, if we are a country where that British promise is kept. Let me just say then one final thing about us and about the conclusions I draw from this. What does it mean for our party going forward? I'm not coming here with a long list of policies. Partly our job as an opposition is to listen to you and to formulate our policies over the coming years. But we'll talk about some of the things that we would do differently from this government. I think one thing I would say is that if our country is about anything, it must be about focusing on this issue. Now that has quite profound implications for our politics, because politics under any government can often be focused on the short term. It can be often focused on the immediate, on the here and now. And I think one of the lessons I learn is that if we are to meet this promise for future generations, then we've got to focus on this issue. And we've got to have a national debate about this issue. How do we properly serve the future generations that there are in Britain? How do we make sure there isn't just equality within a generation, but between generations as well? That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is this has profound implications for the kind of economy we have. Because we can't simply have an economy where it's only those who go to university who get the good jobs. We've got to build an economy over time where people can get on and do better whether they go to university or not, something that our Shadow Cabinet was talking about earlier on today. People talk about 50% of kids going to university. I think that's a good aim. We also need to ensure that for the 50% who don't, they can get the good jobs at good wages as well. And then thirdly, this issue of quality of life, which I think is equally important. Because the next generation does care about jobs and housing and those issues, but it also cares about the environment that they will be inheriting, and they also care about the hours we work as a country and the kind of communities we build. So I think this insight about the next generation and about the British promise to the next generation takes you to a different sort of politics, which focuses on these long-term questions. I think it takes you to building a different sort of economy, and I think it also takes you to focusing on these important issues of quality of life. Let me finally say this. I think our responsibility as a party is to focus on these issues and is to be the people who stand up for the next generation. And I think this actually makes us the optimists in Britain today, because we are the people who actually believe that the next generation can do better than the last, whatever the challenges that they currently face. And I think this is an agenda that goes beyond young people. Some people say, well, this is an agenda just about young people. Actually, it's not just about young people. It's about parents, it's about grandparents, it's about all of us who have not just a responsibility, but I believe a wish to make sure that that promise of progress, that British promise that the next generation does better than the last, is passed on. So I want to thank you very much for coming along today. This is about you. We're going to have about an hour for questions and answers, and I hope we'll keep the answers reasonably short so there'll be as many people as possible who can get in. The final thing I'll say is this. I believe that our politics can rise to this challenge of keeping the British promise to the next generation, and I look forward to building the kind of country that can do that. Thank you very much.